Elective conference kicks off. A range of issues still remain in question, though, from court battles to analysts suggesting that further divides may occur and that President Jacob Zuma to submit fresh representations on why he should not face the number of corruption charges. Is the ANC ready for the conference? Is a big question that everybody's asking. Well, anybody inside the ANC, particularly the leadership, will tell you absolutely we're ready. Well, joining us from our C Point studio is a political analyst and former ANC Member of Parliament, Melanie Verwoerd. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the programme. I hope you were able to catch a little bit of the conversation that my colleague Francis has just had with Deputy SG Jessie Duarte and her comments about ANC tribalism and perhaps some racial minorities not enjoying the space that they did in the past, particularly in the broad sense. Is that something that you share with her as somebody who was in the fold and is a minority herself?
Well, absolutely. I think there are grave concerns that the ANC, the old ANC, is changing, and that the things that we learned to love about the ANC of Madiba, Oliver Tambo and so on, are changing very fast. And one of them is the non-racial narrative. What interests me about what Jessie Duarte says is that, in fact, if you look, she says she's a supporter of Nkosazana. Yes, she says she's not a part of a slate. But what is interesting is that the provisional slate, I know they're not final, that the Dlamini Zuma's camp released, which included the additional 80 members, there are one, as far as I know, white person on that slate of 80, a handful of so-called colored people, and almost no Indian people. And I think that is something that has changed dramatically from what we saw post-94 and also prior to 94. There is definitely a change in this, and it should concern us also what it means for policy and the future of this country.
What do you think caused that? What has happened? You started by saying the ANC of today is not the same as the ANC of old, and there's almost like a destruction of some values. What caused that?
Well, look, I mean, there were some realities that people had to deal with. Policy didn't move as fast as it should have. Some of the legacies of apartheid were so deeply ingrained and haven't changed. I mean, things like the transformation in the economy hasn't happened. So there are some legitimate frustrations, as Jessie Duarte also referred to the land issue. But I think ultimately what changed, if you talk about the values of the ANC in general, it is the fact that leadership changed and the style of leadership changed and the quality of leadership changed. We are a long way off from Madiba and, for that matter, even Thabo Mbeki.
But the ANC always talks about a collective, and so it's not individuals. Are you saying or suggesting that the whole collective of ANC leadership, the quality of the leadership, just changed and not for the better?
No, of course not. There are enormous amount of good people, as far as I can see, in the ANC still. Many of them I know personally, and they are good people. And we see them speaking out, etc. We saw on the weekend two totally opposing events. On the one hand, we saw the funeral of Lalu Chiba. Also, you had a clip of that of Jessie Duarte there, where you saw the ANC of Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo, etc., very visibly. And that is still there. But on the other hand, you also saw the ANC in KZN and the Women's League rally, where they accused the judiciary of all kinds of things, made many racial statements, etc. And that is sort of, unfortunately, at the moment, the part of the ANC that seems to have the upper hand. And of course, one has to say, even though there is a very strong sense of collective leadership in the ANC, that ultimately the one who heads up the organization does have a big influence on who is there, but also how people behave in that organization and what values stand.
Jessie Duarte also spoke about, she said that she believes that the divisions in the party started way back, 2005, and that they missed an opportunity at that point to bring in all of those people that eventually left and started doing other things, and that perhaps they've only just started sort of resurfacing. And I guess the question might be, you know, we're going into another conference now. Have lessons been learned from the past? Or we've already seen a new party formed by Makosi Khoza. Are we going to see another party break away after this conference?
Look, I think she is right that things started quite a while ago. I think in particularly the Polokwane conference created deep divisions in the ANC, and the ANC to some extent is still shocked by what happened there, and they're desperate to avoid that. That's why you're getting so much talk about a unity slate and trying to not have such a bloody election again. What will happen after the election will depend very largely on what happens in the next few days, on who wins as well. I don't believe that the ANC will split in the sense of that it will split down the middle. Some people might leave, as they have done after previous conferences again. Whether there is then a new party that can make a significant impact on 2019 will largely depend on whether they can find somebody charismatic to lead that. And one would have to argue that the only person that one would what that would be charismatic enough would most probably be Cyril Ramaphosa, and I have a question mark whether he would be willing to do that if he does not win. I don't believe that he is keen to do that, and thus we'll have to see what happens after this next week.
So this whole election race has really been about the party, card-carrying members, and they're going to decide who the leadership is going to be. Do you think that any deliberation has happened as to who is electable at a national election in the coming years, or is there too much focus on who takes over the party now, here and now?
Yeah, I think, one needs to look at more than just the top person. I think we, as analysts, also make a mistake by focusing too much on whether it's going to be Cyril Ramaphosa or Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. We should look at the rest of the top 6, first of all, or whatever it's going to be, top 7 or top 9. We should look at that because that obviously impacts a lot on what way the country and the ANC goes, but also what happens in the rest of that NEC, be it a 60 ANC NEC or a 80 NEC members, because they ultimately decide the policy of the ANC. They make decisions for the ANC, and they decide whether they will recall the president, etc., etc. So I think we do need to focus very much on more than just the 2 number 1 candidates. Whether they have looked further than that to 2019, I mean, certainly they do opinion polling. Of course, they know that they are more under pressure than they've ever been before for voter support. But whether they've actually discussed in detail the 2019 elections and who should stand, etc., I doubt it. I mean, we do know, of course, that the president of the ANC will become, assuming the ANC still has more than 50%, will be the president of the country. But apart from that, and possibly the deputy president, I don't believe that there's been extensive discussions around that.
Are you expecting any dramatic turn of events this weekend? I mean, we know that Matthews Posa, for example, they settled out of court about the unity vote in Mpumalanga, but there are suggestions that this issue might come up at conference itself. With so many branches, provinces still dealing with legal issues, could this be a melting pot for drama this weekend?
Well, it is extraordinary the extent of legal challenges that are there. Unhappiness, disgruntlement, frustrations at this stage before a conference, whether it's provincial or national, is not strange. What has changed is the fact that they're taking it to court, and that there are so many battles, some which will not be resolved. For example, the Eastern Cape, they have said that they are going to appeal the ruling by the courts, that they dismissed their application to rule the provincial conference invalid. They're going to take that on appeal. So those things will not be resolved before the ANC conference. So the court cases can certainly play a very big role eventually. And of course, ultimately, if people are still disgruntled at the end of the conference, they can take the outcome of that conference to court. Will we see some interesting things happening at the conference? Well, we could. The ANC is certainly very concerned about the fact that there might be violence at the conference, as we saw at the Eastern Cape conference. I think they're very prepared for it, but of course, you can never be 100% 100% sure that it's not going to happen. And yes, you know, at various stages throughout that conference, a lot of things can happen. It is a highly, highly contested conference. There has never, in my understanding, there has never been an election that is going to be this close for the presidency in particularly. And there is a lot at stake, not only for the country and for the ANC, but also for some of the individual members who know that their futures, possibly whether they go to jail or not, can be determined at this conference. So there is a lot at stake. And yes, the intensity of this conference is going to be something else.
All right, so Melanie Verwoerd, that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very, very much indeed for your insights this evening, and I'm sure that we'll be having a number of conversations with you and others in the coming days.